finally getting answers about what happened to the girl forced to live for years in a closet. Should teachers be graded on a yearly basis and those that fail be fired? Shockingly large property appraisal notices dropping into area mailboxes. Those stories and more coming up. Hello, I'm Nick Haynes, and good to have you with us again on the program that goes beyond the soundbite and takes you behind the headlines, making news in Kansas City. Dissecting those news stories this week, the Kansas City Star's nationally syndicated columnist, Mary Sanchez, Stacey Cameron, chief investigative reporter at KCTV5, from News Radio 98.1 KMBZ, Scott Parks, and Star reporter, blogger, and columnist, Dave Helling. The Cleveland abduction case in which 3 women were unfathomably locked away for a decade before being finally liberated this week brings questions about how someone can be forced to live like this for so long without anyone noticing. But they happen more often than we care to acknowledge. Just this past week, the files on a 10-year-old Kansas City girl locked in a closet for years are finally released by the state, and it reveals how a whole community, including neighbors, schools, and family, failed to rescue her as she was forced to live in her own urine and feces. A 10-year-old girl weighing just 26 pounds, the size many babies reach at 18 months. Mary Sanchez, what did we learn from uncovering those records about how that could happen this week?
Well, I think we're still learning a lot. I mean, honestly, we're still going through all the records. It's horrifying when you read them, because you literally see these normal records of school and things, but they're tracking this horrible abuse that this child went through. One of the things about these cases is little bitty kids are easier to lose track of, and also, I think, older people. This girl, at the time she left school, you know, it was kindergarten, and it was later in the year, it was in April. Well, then she disappears a month later and just never comes back into the school system. So the tracking of her, you know, there's just several things. That was one thing. The school district does things differently now. Once a child is a little bit older, there's money attached to them being in school, the head counts. And so that almost puts it in play that schools are going to be more accountable. So there's a lot of different factors at a lot of different levels of things that occurred. You know, there was some subcontracting out of some of the social work. But honestly, some of those organizations that do that run some of the best-known centers around Kansas City. So,
with this Cleveland case this week, you know, so many people did come to me and say, you know, how does this happen, Scott? But yet we do have these cases right here in our midst. May not be as dramatic as the one we saw in Cleveland, but neighbors don't do something to stop that from happening, or schools may not make calls to try and find out what may be happening behind the scenes?
Well, and I think part of the problem is, and LP, the case that we're talking about, is just one of several that we've had in Kansas City in the last year. Everybody remembers the young child in DeSoto that was kept in the attic for many years. Part of the problem, I think, is this sense that neighbors have, and I don't know when it started, and maybe it's always been this way. That's not my business. That's not my problem. But how someone can live, the LP case being the example we're using, how you can live in an apartment complex and not smell the conditions that this girl was living in an apartment next door or out in the hallway, speaks volumes of this, well, that's not my problem. But if we're talking about, you know, where are people falling through the cracks, you could point the finger in any number of directions. The neighbors, social workers. Why did the school not check?
But part of it is that we think that somebody else is going to step in. We assume that there are social services and other agencies that do the checking for us, don't we, Dave?
And one of the public policy issues that I think needs to be examined in even greater detail is this whole idea of what they call stovepiping of information, in which the social service workers are not talking to the police, who are not talking to the parents, who are not talking to the school officials. We really got an interesting look at that, frankly, Nick, back on 9/11. That was the whole critique, that agencies aren't talking to each other, and I think that has really never been fixed, never really been addressed. The Boston bombing is also another potential example of where agencies have information, but no one is in a place to put all the pieces together. And I think the LP case and others suggest to us that there needs to be some attention paid to that problem. That literally is why things fall through the cracks.
Stacey.
Well, one of the other things I think we need to worry about here is when we talk about services like the Department of Family Services that are looking at child welfare, or we look at juvenile courts, we're talking about children. And there's a big concern for privacy, that not too much information comes out about the kids that could identify them. And the problem becomes these systems seem to be set up more to protect the parents' rights and the agency workers rather than the kids. So when the Star found out trying to get these records that are supposed to be made public, they couldn't, so that they could go back and hold people accountable. We're so concerned about privacy in some instances that what we're really trying to do, protect the children, is lost in the shuffle.
And this was an extraordinary effort to just even get these records released at this point, wasn't it, Mary?
Let's just say a lot of pressure, legal, political, on every single level, you know, in my columns, just badgering them. The rationale that the state uses, and it's not crazy, is that when there's other siblings, surviving siblings, what is the impact of opening records? I mean, quite honestly, we know what LP's name is. We're just, you know, we're not going to publish that sort of stuff. There's so many things that professionals will not reveal about this case. We're just not going to, and it is in the criminal system. However, you know, there's a 2000 state law that says when a child dies who has been within the system, you open the records, or if they die or if it's a near fatality. And that term near fatality is part of the problem. Who decides that? And then who decides who opens the records? It's one person. It's the director of the department. And I think that needs to change. It needs to be more of a conglomerate of people making that decision.
Well, and for that reason, there's no check and balances in these systems. If you've got one person, the director, who makes that arbitrary decision, they're going to CYA in every instance. And if we're worried about kids, then those records need to be more accessible, even the kids that might have survived, because you stop and ask yourself, if this mother in the LP case was abusing the oldest daughter, how well off were the other two? So we're worried about protecting their welfare, but are we really just simply trying to protect the government workers who probably weren't doing their jobs in many of these instances?
Well, Scott started by saying, you know, it's up to citizens also to say that they need to be more involved and ask questions. I want to segue to another part of a story this week, and that's sometimes citizens saying they're not going to be willing to take no for an answer and are willing to press forward with their gut feelings. In Ottawa, Kansas this week, it took the relentless pursuit of friends and not the police to uncover what ultimately turned out to be a triple homicide. In fact, sheriff's deputies reportedly came out to a crime scene and left saying they found only the smell of rotten trash. Not satisfied, the friends who made the police call came back later to the house and tracked the offensive odor to a decaying body in a garage. And now, is this citizens unwilling to take no for an answer, Scott?
No. In fact, I think this is intuition on the part of the friends who found the bodies, beg your pardon. But ultimately, I think a lot of blame, if we're going to do this quickly, falls on the Franklin County Sheriff's Department. You know, I've never smelled death, but I can imagine what it does smell like, and I'm sure it doesn't smell like week-old trash. And I think there should be at least some accountability with the sheriff's deputies who went out there. And so easily, it seems, dismiss this as the smell of trash, and here's another interesting point, dirty living, whatever that's supposed to mean, and just simply walked away without looking into it. And, you know, I imagine that the 20-something friends, 20-year-old something friends, who went out there and then returned the next day and did find this woman's body underneath a drum set in the garage, they knew what the smell of death was. When they made the call, they said, we have a stench of death here at this site, at this home. Interestingly enough, the same address where Kaylee Bailey had been reported to be headed when she was called in as a missing person just 2 days prior. Connect a couple of dots.
Scott is right, and honestly, I have smelled that smell. It is, you do not forget it. It is searing, it is different than anything else you've ever smelled. The fact that the deputies could go out there and not find it, or perhaps dismiss it because I wonder about class issues oftentimes, and this comes up with LP too. Children who are of lower socioeconomic, are there less eyes and ears out for them? Sometimes. I don't know, but I absolutely agree with Scott on this one.
And it's an easy story to tie to the first one we talked about, Nick. The welfare of children, as Scott had pointed out. They knew that the mother was going there with her young little daughter, and they were both missing. And at that point, whether it was clean and it was dirty, that should have alerted the sheriff's deputies then to take a broader look at that home and that residence, because they knew there was a missing child. She was supposed to be going to that residence. Clearly something was amiss. It was at least dirty and smelled. They dropped the ball. I don't think anyone can argue that.
I think there'll also be some attention paid to the incarceration history of the suspect in this case, and already those questions are starting to come out. But again, I think there is a broader policy issue here, Nick, and that is that for whatever reason, it's easy for us to sort of second guess decisions in any particular case.
Absolutely.
Well, we would have called it in if we... And you know, hindsight is always 20/20. But you do get the sense that for whatever reason, is it training, is it money, is it lack of personnel, that the people who are involved in our security are missing some dots that could be easily connected. And I do think that you would hope that in Kansas, Missouri, and in this region, that there is an attempt to step back, to examine this case and others, to understand why obvious signs were not seen early on. That's true in Cleveland, Ohio, by the way, with these kidnapped victims and others. Again, you get the sense people knew what was going on, they just weren't able to put it all in one place.
And not to pile on the Franklin County Sheriff's Department, but I'd be interested to know, and maybe we'll find out soon enough, did they even venture out to this property on Friday or on Saturday of last week when this missing persons call was made? I've worked in Franklin County. That's where I got my start in radio. The Franklin County Sheriff's Department, with all due respect, does not exactly have a lot on its plate on a daily basis. You would think that one deputy in the middle of the afternoon, or maybe sometime on Sunday, doing his normal rounds through Franklin County, could just stop by the property and say, hey, we have a missing persons report for Kaylee Bailey. Have you seen her? But that apparently wasn't done.
Just quickly, the other problem is that, and I'm sure everyone around this table understands that law enforcement officials are not used to and not happy with people who question their decision-making process. We've just been through the case in Leawood where the Johnson County Sheriff went out and busted a couple that were growing plants in the basement, and that's bad enough, but they won't answer questions, they don't apologize, that's true with all law enforcement to some degree, and that makes solving problems like that even more difficult.
We're not a crime show, but there are a lot of questions to be asked, and I'm pleased you know there are bigger public policy questions. Another part of this, the case has also challenged the Amber Alert system. There's been a controversy relating to that. With the Amber Alert that's set up to notify the public of a missing child. The Kansas Bureau of Investigation refused to issue an Amber Alert in this case. Once it became clear the 21-year-old Kaylee Bailey of Olathe was one of the victims in this triple homicide, and her 18-month-old Lana was missing. Family members were outraged. Isn't that what Amber Alerts are for, they argued? Is that what they're for?
Right. Well,
Stacey?
they're supposed to be able to alert the public in a particular media area that this child is out, giving identifying information. If the child's under 17 years old, if they believe the child is in immediate threat of harm, and there's some a need to alert. So what KBI said in this instance, well, the girl's face, identifying information, and the fact that she was missing had been on the air for days, and we didn't want to do a taking, coming onto the networks and the radio stations and taking their time. But the problem is this, Nick, that Amber Alert, when it goes out, other media markets start to pick it up and start to broadcast it. So had she been taken somewhere else, it wouldn't have gotten the attention it probably should have. So to me, on both sides of this, whether it's KBI or the Franklin County Sheriff's Office, they're both playing a game of CYA right now. And as we've discussed, they don't
What's CYA?
cover your radio.
Oh, okay, sorry. Little slow on the uptake today. All righty.
They don't have that.
You Americans.
That's right.
All righty. Okay, Mary.
In this case, though, I do think, and I probably, we'll be looking into this a little bit further. There's, definitely you have to respect the feelings of the families here. I mean, honestly, they've just been wonderful with media, working with media all week in this horrific situation.
Yes.
However, you really have to look at the timeline. The woman first left to go visit that farm property at noon on Wednesday. Her family didn't report her missing till Friday. Amber Alerts aren't designed around that. They're designed around the Pamela Butler sort of cases, an immediate danger of extreme harm where you know something about a suspect and that the public can then come in and help with that search. This case didn't fit that.
Scott.
Duly noted, then say that. The excuse that the KBI gave on Wednesday of this week was that the picture had been out there enough. Well, actually, the picture wasn't prominently displayed on local TV stations until Wednesday afternoon when they issued an advisory for help. Instead of an Amber Alert. And one of the reasons they gave is they didn't want to take over the public or the private airwaves. The airwaves are not private. They're owned by the public.
Okay. Well, and here's another thing. We're in the May ratings period. We'll break in for almost anything, so that's ridiculous. We would have covered this case. We have. All four of the networks here locally have interrupted programming to cover this story and to get the girls out there. So the KBI way out there. So I agree with Scott.
There's a lot more to cover this week. Thank you for that conversation on this issue. In other news this week, Missouri wants to do it all it can to compete with Kansas. You've no doubt heard about that business border battle where Missouri feels Kansas is luring companies to the other side of state line. Well, to try and stay competitive, the Missouri legislature this week passes the first income tax reductions in 90 years. Big reductions in corporate income tax rates, as well as a drop in the top individual income tax rates. Plus, a new 50% deduction would be phased in for business income reported on individual income tax returns. The tax cut would reduce state revenue by an estimated $700 million a year. Is this all about playing catch-up with Kansas, Dave?
To a large degree, although the Missouri package, which has passed both houses, is a little less draconian than the Kansas package. It has triggers. It won't kick in unless certain targets are met. It does not, however, include a sales tax, which the Kansas people are now arguing about. So, but it's clearly driven by this idea that you have to cut corporate levies in order to draw businesses and therefore employment to your state. That was Rex Sinkfield's argument all along. If we can get them to do it in Kansas, we can convince Missouri to do it. It's worked perfectly. You do get the sense that there may be a bit of a race to see who can cut taxes more quickly. Kansas, of course, is considering that now.
Will the governor of Missouri, though, Jay Nixon, sign this?
I doubt it. He's made very strong, had very strong criticisms of this measure. It changed a little bit when they took the sales tax part of it out. Originally, it increased sales taxes to cover the shortage. He said, I'm not going to sign a bill that raises taxes. That's typical Jay Nixon. But now that that's out, his excuse for not signing it has been reduced. Nevertheless, I think it's likely that he'll veto this bill.
But if you have every state, though, doing this, doesn't it take away the impact, though, of what Sam Brownback is trying to do in Kansas, if Missouri is going to be doing the same thing they are?
Well, to an extent, I think it certainly does. But I'm with Dave on this. It almost seems like a game of catch-up on the part of Missouri. But historically, I think it's been shown governments don't take losing money very well. When a tax goes down, something else has to go up. And it'll be interesting to watch and see what is going up to make up for this $700 million shortfall.
Well, we should be clear. It isn't happening everywhere else. They tried this in Nebraska. It didn't work.
Yes.
Oklahoma thought about it. Arkansas, Louisiana, other states are considering this sort of drastic reduction in taxes. It really hasn't taken a hold except in Kansas, and because of that in Missouri, largely because of what's happening in Kansas City.
Well, one of the ways in Missouri that they're trying to pay for this loss of revenue will be shrinking services, but also by taking tax credits from the poor and disabled in Missouri. You have the renter's portion of the tax credit that is off the table now, some $57 million for people who make less than $30,000 a year. So the government is cutting services like that for the disabled and the poor in Missouri, and it won't cover the entire $700 million hole, but we've got all this talk about lowering those tax rates for wealthy and corporations, but really no discussion about these tax credits that are going away for poor seniors and the disabled in Missouri.
But you said the governor's not going to sign this.
Well, I mean, I'm not the governor, so we'll see, but I think it's highly unlikely. Again, what Stacey's talking about, Nick, and we've talked about on this show, is the effort in both states is to shift the tax burden away from the wealthy and onto the poor, and that's what's going on.
Should teachers be graded on a yearly basis and those that fail be fired? Well, a bill to do just that has been working its way through the Missouri legislature and has been a top priority for House Speaker Tim Jones. There's even been ads running on TV in Missouri. It's tied to another measure that calls for the immediate takeover of the Kansas City, Missouri School District. Yet despite it being such an important issue for the Republican leadership and the fact that the GOP controls both chambers of the Missouri legislature, by large margins, by the way, the measure narrowly failed this week. But as Mary Sanchez, writing in a column this week, points out, This is not the last we've heard of the subject. We could be voting on this at a statewide ballot issue soon, courtesy of St. Louis businessman and wealthy political backer Rex Sinquefield. He wants to put this on the ballot for all of us to decide.
Well, but that's also a part of this push to push the politicians. You know, they want to please Rex. I mean, for money, for contributions, all sorts of things. This will be caught up in the courts for a little while. That's part of the tit-for-tat little game with these petitions. You know, there's been a lawsuit filed on it, so then they'll perhaps, you know, gather some signatures. Those might have to be thrown out, depending on the timing. This issue, though, nationally is massive, and it's good. There does need to be more accountability on teachers. It's like I wrote in the column, though, the devil is in the details of how you work all this out. And, you know, from what I said, is what is the big push? Is it really about children and ensuring their better education and the quality of the teachers in the classrooms, or is it to go against unions? And when the politicians get involved, some hands, I do think a lot of it is just very anti-union.
Okay, well, let's look at some of the details. The original proposal here would allow administrators to evaluate teachers annually and assign them one of 4 ratings: highly effective, effective, minimally effective, or ineffective, and at least a third of the evaluation would be based on the academic achievement and growth of students. Confidential teacher surveys and input from parents also would have to be taken into account. Probationary teachers could be fired if they're rated ineffective for 2 consecutive years, and tenured teachers ousted after 3 consecutive ratings of ineffective. Now, do parents like this idea, do you think, of this kind of accountability, Scott?
This parent likes the idea of grading teachers, making them more accountable. I struggle, though, with this notion that we're going to use student performance as a major component in the grading of the teachers.
Why do you struggle with that?
Because so many different factors go into how well a student does in school, and a lot of it starts in the home. The teachers, you know, the student comes in, they're a mold of clay. But what kind of mold are they getting when they go home? You know, there have been studies that show that students' performance can increase by 25% by a parent simply asking every night, "How was your day?" A lot of students in certain districts in this city don't get that a lot when they go home. My brother's a teacher, and he taught in a rough high school in Wichita years ago. And he once told me he would be lucky on parent-teacher night if 10% of his students' parents would come in. Well, find out what it is in Blue Valley. What's the parent turnout on a parent-teacher night in a 5th grade classroom? I bet it would be markedly higher than it is in some of the other districts in Kansas City.
So you think to hold the teacher accountable for all of that is unfair?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Well, but
isn't the problem, though, Mary, that you do have teachers who have been there forever and there's no way to get rid of them?
I don't know that there's no way. There are ways to get rid of teachers who are tenured. And part of it is this, proving a track record of difficulties within their classrooms. One of the good things about the better models of doing these teacher evaluations is that it does take into account what Scott is talking about. You can measure, and it gets very convoluted to really explain here, but you can measure what a teacher gives to the classroom over a period of time to a certain extent. There's a lot of caveats here, but there are measures that can kind of account for that and somewhat take that out of the equation and really just look at what certain teachers get done in their classrooms and what others don't over a period of time.
Stacey.
Well, teacher accountability is certainly an issue, but our educational system in this country has systemic problems. And we're not talking about the real issues that need to be addressed. We're simply latching on to one thing, teachers and unions, and saying that may cause the fix. Until at the federal and the state levels we decide that this whole educational system needs to start from the ground up again, none of these problems get fixed.
But Rex Sinquefield, the St. Louis businessman, he has made this a priority. And he has been pretty persuasive in getting issues on the ballot,
well,
Dave.
He has a few dollars to help put it out there, which is, of course, the source of his power. But teacher performance and, more broadly said, school performance is extraordinarily important, Nick, in both states because lawmakers spend hundreds of millions of dollars on education, and it drives them crazy that performance doesn't always match that spending for a whole host of reasons. That's why this issue won't go away.
Quickly, I want to get to this story. Some shockingly large property appraisal notices started dropping into area mailboxes this week in Jackson County. Some of those home appraisals were 5 times as high as last year's. The Kansas City Star reported on one resident who saw her 3-bedroom home on the rolls at $48,000 last year, but appraised at $229,000 this year. Roughly 70,000 Jackson County residents are getting the new appraisals delivered through their mailboxes this week. So is there a problem, or is Jackson County simply the new most desirable community to live in the metro now?
I got one.
Yes.
In my mailbox.
What was it, 5 times as high?
It wasn't 5 times, but it was, let's see, questionable for the changes that were made in my house. A little grass seed in the lawn.
So is there a problem, Dave?
Well, there is a problem for specific homeowners. I talked to some this week who are outraged about their appraisals going up. That's always the case when you reappraise homes because it is kind of a guess. What you always hear is, I couldn't sell my house for that amount of money. And that's often a good argument. There is a process for going through an appraisal disagreement. By and large, you do not sense that there's a great, massive public outcry in Johnson County about the appraisals in the community.
In Jackson County?
In Jackson County.
Okay. There are certain areas.
But there are certain areas who are quite upset.
But you can appeal, and people are getting them.
Of course, and they do.
And they are getting them.
And they work through that process. It's a headache, but it can be done.
Alrighty, and that is our Week in Review. Our thanks to our news reviewers from the Star, Dave Helling, and from KCTV5, Stacey Cameron, Star syndicated columnist Mary Sanchez, and from News Radio 98.1 KMBZ, Scott Parks, talking about the news with you weekdays from 2 to 6 as 50% of Dana and Parks. Before we leave you, I invite you to join me next Thursday night on KCPT as we take a closer look at an underestimated killer, skin cancer. Did you know that Kansas and Missouri rank among the 10 states with the highest death rates from melanoma? Join me Thursday at 7 for more than Skin Deep. I'm Nick Haynes. From all of us here at KCPT, thanks for spending part of your weekend with us.